I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, Abbie, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
Hi, Anna. I'm great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so lovely to have you. Just before recording, we just mentioned that you are Freya's sister. And I don't remember actually when Freya was on, but she must have been on somewhere in the first like 4, maybe 5 seasons. I mean, we're up to, I don't know how many seasons we have now, but so a few years back, at least
Yes.
3, 4 years ago.
Her daughter is 4 years old,
Right.
just over 4. So, yeah, for sure, I think would be about 3.5 years.
Yes.
More.
And yeah, I loved having Freya on and loved her birth story. And she has a really cool birth video as well. I remember she showed me. And you're her sister and you're her baby sister, yeah?
I'm her older sister.
You're her older sister. But you had babies
Yes.
after her. So you were
I
also a
did.
little bit inspired by her, I'm
For sure.
guessing. So I'd love to, because she ended up having a free birth for her last baba, didn't she?
Actually, her second two, her
Oh, yeah.
last two. Yeah, the last one, the very last one was completely planned, whereas the
Oh.
second one, which wasn't planned to the rest of us, but she said that she had kind of planned it, that was a potential. And I was there with her husband for that free birth, which was incredible. Yeah.
I mean, I love that so much when women invite their sisters, especially if they haven't had children, or like obviously like their daughters or their mother as well. I mean, and only if it's supportive, only if obviously there's alignment and they feel the safety and everything, like that's paramount. But what a blessing to receive that. How was that for you? Because I've never had anyone on to share that experience. So as a maiden, you watched your sister free birth. Tell us about that
Yes.
first.
It just gave me chills, actually. Like, I can remember it so vividly. And like, basically, I had asked to be part of her birth if it was possible because I wasn't sure I'd ever have my own children. And she said I could be her photographer. And, and I actually had been traveling and living in India. And so I came back early because she said she was going to have a baby. Anyway, she woke me up. I said to her, I have to go back to Melbourne to work tomorrow. So you need to have this baby tonight because it was actually then a little bit later. And so she woke me up and said, okay, it's on. And we thought we were going to the hospital. But actually about an hour later, she said, we're not going. We're going to have the baby at home. And my sister, you don't argue with her. When she says she wants to do something, you're doing it that way. So we said, okay, great. was so amazing. Like I was a bit nervous, obviously, and I'd never seen natural birth. She showed me a couple of YouTube videos the night before to sort of prepare me. And yeah, we just went with her cues and supported her as she needed, just made food and kept spirits up, cleaned up messes as we needed. And when it came down to, and she was actually super calm and quiet the whole way through until I know at one point she said to me, I can't do this. Take me to hospital. And I said, I'm really ready to do that, and I'd quite like to, but you made me promise to remind you that you can do this and you want to do this. And she was in transition at that point. And so, yeah, she said, yes, you're right, I can. And she did. And it was literally at the very end where she roared and she had an orgasmic birth as well. Like I could see what was going on with her body. And I was like, what is this? It was amazing, seriously. And her baby was born, beautiful, healthy baby boy. So
Wow.
it was incredible.
Fantastic.
And that was my first and only, birth experience. So I was so blessed to have such a positive experience.
Such a positive experience. What an incredible experience to experience that.
Yeah. It was so amazing. And now I know more about birth. Like I know about the hormones and oxytocin and how that's not only for the birthing mama, but also those around. But I remember just thinking that because it was kind of throughout the night, and then it was just as the sun rose when she gave birth, we had candles and music, and it felt a bit like I felt like I'd been at a festival all night, and in the morning, just that absolute ecstasy of all of us, feeling so high with love and positivity. So it was incredible.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, this is why you can just be a birth worker for life, because it's just this intoxicating, magical, euphoric high, especially home births, right? Especially that experience of just a woman totally in her own domain, just, doing it. And like you said, like we get affected by the high oxytocin in the ethers. Like it actually transmutes, like we feel high, we get high too. I mean, the mother is on another planet, but us as witnesses, as you experienced, you do feel that high. It's
for sure
amazing. It's palpable in the air.
Yeah.
So cool. I mean, that must have been amazing. So did that inform you when you became pregnant in how you wanted to birth your baby? Now let's go dive on into your story, because I'd love to hear.
And then of course my sister had her third baby was a planned free birth. So again, and incredible, which as you said, she had a film which I saw whilst I was pregnant. But my partner is a pharmacist and very in the medical system. So when I was pregnant, he was basically very adverse to following in my sister's footsteps. And I definitely liked the idea of a home birth, but I couldn't afford a private midwife. So there was really no way we were going to have a home birth. We weren't going to do a free birth. And I wasn't confident to do that. And also I needed my partner confident, because he's my partner and I was going to, feed off his energy.
Absolutely. I think this is key information, what you're saying, because, I can often hear that people go like, oh, well, it's the woman that births her baby. And it's like, yeah, but of course you're having this partner of yours that is going to affect that process by if he's afraid, right? And so it's really important to get the partner on board and find that compromise that works for both. Ultimately, obviously, it's the woman's choice, but you don't want to fight or be in fight with your partner during your labor and birth, or just feel like he's actually giving off vibes of being fearful, or that's going to affect the process.
Definitely, for sure. And our local hospital, I had quite a few friends who'd had really amazing birth experiences there, like some completely natural. So I had definitely been had more positive stories from this hospital. So yeah, I was looking forward to it. However, my very first phone call it was a phone call session with the obstetrician, because it was during COVID. And yeah, just because I was 38 years old at that, or 39 years, whatever I was. I was 39 when I gave birth.
You were a geriatric mother. Come on now.
I was a geriatric
Tell us the term.
mother.
You were old as...
I know, exactly. That's right. And so the obstetrician started going through all these risk factors. And when I actually went in person and she saw me in person, she said, okay, you do definitely look really healthy and well. And I'm a yoga teacher, and, you know, I definitely take pride in my health and well-being. And so she said, okay, that's fine, but statistically, yada, yada, yada. And I said, I'm not really interested in your statistics. I want to go to full term. I do not wish to go by what you think is protocol, you know, in this hospital. I would like to go as natural as possible. And my partner and I, we did a calm birth course together, and we definitely found a lot of information really valuable and wrote our birth plan. And anyway, when we got up to 39, 40 weeks, and then each day after 40 weeks, they wanted to just check in on me and, you know, make sure everything was going okay, which it was so fine. But they were just concerned, I think maybe I had to do another scan or something, whatever it came up about fluid.
When you come to 41 weeks, they start to want to do ultrasounds more regularly to check the placenta, the flow, and the amniotic fluid. And first I want to just reiterate for anyone who's new to this podcast that age is not a factor. Age is not a risk factor. I want to say that again for everyone in the back. The age of a woman is not a risk factor. It's exactly what you just shared. It's like your holistic health, looking at a woman holistically. Those statistics are on all women at that age bracket. And the thing is, the older we get, the more comorbidities people have, right? The more unhealthy people get. That in itself might be a factor that could potentially make you high risk. But age in itself, no.
Definitely.
And then the other thing is this whole thing about over monitoring someone, especially if you do fall into like being high risk, which it feels like almost everyone is today, because there's always some reason to put a high risk label, is to do ultrasounds to check for, as I said, amniotic fluid and the placenta and placental flow and kind of size of baby. The only thing that's interesting in that equation is the placental flow. The other things, baby size, often so wrong, and I really want everyone to hear this. So often wrong, and it's only a screening tool. It's not diagnostic, but it's like preached like that. And then amniotic fluid too. That on its own, no evidence shows that matters at all. It's only in combination if you look at kind of baby size, amniotic fluid, and placental flow, especially placental flow, if that is kind of reduced or reversed or something, then we're talking. But what's happening today is like, oh, your baby's really big. Oh, your baby's really small. Oh, you have no amniotic fluid left. We have to induce, which is BS. Just telling everyone listening.
Yep, I agree. And in fact, they actually, because I was, you know, the old tape measurer of your weeks, etc. With my first, I was measuring small. So I, you know, had the scans done, and then like a few weeks later, another scan, growth scan. And, you know, they just said, my sonographer actually was really great. She said, well, you're petite, your partner's petite, you're going to have a baby for your body. And the last scan, my mum came with me, and the sonographer said something about, oh, she has a small head or something like this, not as in too small or anything. And my mum said, oh, great. You know, that's good. And it's funny because my babies were both born with smaller than average heads, and then they grew larger than average within the first few months. So, you know, it's so with that first pregnancy, you know, I went along with all of those recommendations, but the second pregnancy, I researched so much more. And because of my experience in the first one, I basically didn't take any of those later tests, or because it just created anxiety, and it just created this sort of negative pathway in my mind,
Yeah, and
which
I
I
loved how you said
didn't
that.
need.
Yeah, you said that, I think before we actually started recording, like how you're coming on to really like share your story, which I love, with that intention of like first time mamas, like, hey, know this. Like when you just
Yep,
go along with whatever you're offered, then the risk of being derailed from what you want your birth experience to be is very high. And so
definitely.
like what you then did for your second, like do that for your first, right? That's kind of what you're
Oh,
coming up
for
to
sure.
share with everyone.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think even just the like some of the things that were offered, I said I refused. And that was definitely due to my sister giving me lots of information. And although some of her information I couldn't quite appreciate at the time, and it just was maybe given in a way that wasn't conducive for my confidence at that point. Like I needed to research it myself, I think, in a different way. But it was really great having that kind of, she was pretty anti hospital system, and so it definitely gave me some fuel to refuse a
Yeah,
lot of what would have been really pressured into me. Whereas,
yeah,
yeah, because she said about it was safer to induce me at 39 weeks than to like it would have a more favorable outcome as a natural birth, in the hospital. And I just said, I don't believe that. I'm not going to take your word for it.
yeah. The obstetrician said that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I've since spoken to friends who were given that information and followed that information, and they did not have the birth that they wished that they'd had.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
it's
A lot of women, most women are not ready and their baby's not ready at 39 weeks. For
mm,
some, they are, and then they have a spontaneous start.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's not going to be
exactly.
for them, right? And so
Yeah,
their bodies are not ready, and it's really hard to start someone cold like that who's actually not ready and ripe to birth. And
exactly.
then you go for days with, failure to progress or failed
Yep.
induction, and then maybe, ending up in a cesarean because actually your baby and body wasn't ready.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But for you, we're going to go back to your
Yes.
story. Do you want to kind of summarize for us what happened with your first that really informed you? And I also want to say this, like, there's nothing wrong with that either, because we birth the way we live. And we also can only, like you said, we can only take in information to where we're at that time in our own lives,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's nothing wrong. And we all like meet, you know, life's challenges at different times in our life and in
hmm
mothering. Like some have it in pregnancy, some have it in the birth, and some have it in the postpartum, right? And so
hmm
no one's going to go through the whole continuum of childbearing like just flowing through easy breezy, no problem. No, we're all going to face different things, right? So I also want
Yep.
to emphasize that just because someone goes through that with their first, or maybe plans for having a natural birth and then ends up having something else, like trust in the wisdom that holds, and it will show itself to you as well,
hmm
like the kind of mother you need to be for your child. What did it teach you? Or what did it teach you about yourself? Were you stuck in the good girl, in the people pleaser, or were you still, trusting authority too much and
hmm
all these things, right? Or were you too influenced by your partner? Or like you learn in
For
every
sure.
scenario of your life. There's
Yeah.
it's not inherently wrong. It's just that
hmm
was what you needed to do for your first, right? That was the
Yeah.
lessons you
Yeah.
needed to go through.
hmm Uh, yeah. And I would say that, yeah, following kind of, uh, yeah, it was like I kind of did what I was expected, but I had a little bit of independence in saying, no, actually, I don't want to do it quite this way. Or I'd
Mm.
learned just enough to know, actually, I really don't want the Syntocin drip.
Mm.
Okay, body, let's go, just
Yeah,
certain elements,
yeah.
where I was able to kind of break out of what probably would have been a whole lot of a different experience. But so we talked about before that we started recording, just before I got to 41 weeks with Tenzin, my first, I went in for this check of the fluid, and I actually didn't really know what was happening. And it was during COVID. So my partner wasn't allowed to come into the appointment with me, but they had told me in case they find anything, and they want to start like the birth sooner, pack my bags. So it was really, and they actually just rang me not long before the appointment started. So it was kind of a mad scramble at home to kind of get things ready. So I was filled already with a lot of anxiety going to the hospital. It's about a 45-minute drive. So we get there and I go in by myself, and the midwife, Rossadon, doesn't introduce her name. I hadn't met her before. She hooks me up to something, puts me in a room and leaves me. And I start getting really anxious. She comes in, takes my blood pressure, which it's generally always high the first reading when I'm in a hospital or doctor's setting. Mm-hmm. So it presented really high. And she started going, okay, this is all right. We better check again, and just my anxiety grew. So the blood pressure went higher and my heart rate went higher, all of those things. And after the third reading, within actually quite a short amount of time too, then they said, actually someone else came in and said, look, I'm going to call your partner in now, and we're just a little bit concerned that you might have preeclampsia, and we'd really like to start an induction now.
Wow. I mean, I have to stop you here and just say to everyone, like, I hope you can already pick this up, but if you don't know, there's something called white coat syndrome, and it's known in the medical establishment too. So it's not a hocus pocus word that I'm making up, right? So white coat syndrome is that, which a lot of women have. They come into hospital or they go to their doctor or midwife, and they get, because of anxiety, because of the white coat syndrome is kind of like, this authority figure creating anxiety within me. Going into hospital might create anxiety in me, and it causes high blood pressure and also high pulse, right? And it seems like to just go over these people's heads, and they instantly go to preeclampsia. Like, do you have any other symptom? No.
I know.
What? They just wanted to induce you.
I know. And they did take a blood test, but they didn't wait for that result. So they started the balloon catheter induction, and then they had me, whatever monitor that they had me on with the heart, my pulse, it was just getting higher and higher. And my partner was like kind of making a joke of it, as in like, I know it just as in, because it was like red alerting because of going too high. And so he would just turn it off because no one was coming, and it was making me more nervous. And he's like, we don't need it. I can tell you're not about to die. And because he's a medical professional, he also was like, I know you. I know you're nervous. I know you're anxious. And we were trying to do our breathing and talk about other things. But yeah, it was just getting worse and worse, to the point where then my heart had an irregular heartbeat. So they call it a trigeminy. And at that point, nothing was really explained all that well to me until then. There were 6 people in the room, and they said, it's a weekend. We're a small hospital. We don't have a cardiologist. We actually would feel safer if we now transferred you to one of our partner hospitals, a larger one, which is in the city, so that just in case something happens during birth, something with your heart, that you've got a team to support you. So that was that. We stopped the induction, and they were all really nice and just wanted me to rest and relax. But it was so much to just be in this room and then know, okay, now I'm going to another hospital who I don't know anyone there. It's a really large hospital. So my anxiety was terrible all night, just going through all what could happen and what's going to happen, what has happened. And then I got into an ambulance transfer, and because it wasn't an emergency, everything was actually, they were really relaxed. And the 2 young women in the ambulance were so lovely and so relaxed that when they took my blood pressure, as soon as we moved away from the hospital, it was back to normal.
Isn't that curious?
Yeah, I know. I was like, yes, I'm getting away from this place. The movement felt good. I just felt like I could just reset. Yeah.
And how often is this happening in our system today, that women are just being, the way that they are being treated or not cared for, essentially, is causing these reactions that then they get labeled all these things. And is it really? And obviously with you, it's so obvious that it wasn't, right? Especially as
I
you
know.
have a normal blood pressure as soon as you get away from that hospital. It's totally caused
Exactly.
by the hospital and the care professionals. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. And then when I arrived at the major hospital, the main midwife, I guess the sort of manager, she was so awesome. She was so authoritative. Like, you look healthy and well to me, but you have a lot of adrenaline and we need oxytocin. So we're going to look after you. Everything's fine. Just want you to relax and we'll take care of you. And it was just exactly what I needed to hear. And it felt like a mother, just she was maybe a little bit older too. And it just felt really, I felt really held and supported finally, whereas I did not feel that way in the other hospital. So fast forward quite a few hours, a cardiologist came. Yes, your heart is working fine. You do have a trigeminy, but it can actually be really normal in pregnancy. No one actually said that to me at the other hospital, but he told me it happened. It's really common, and don't worry, everything is fine. But because I was there in this other hospital and I was 41 weeks, they asked, well, what do you want to do? And the obstetrician was really lovely there. She just asked, what do you want to do now? You can do whatever you want. It's up to you. You're fine, you're healthy. Yeah. But because we were there, all our stuff was there. I guess I'd been through 2 days almost. I said, okay, well, I'm not about to go all the way home and then go back to the other hospital. like, I guess I'm here. Let's have a baby. So we started with the prostaglandin induction, and then my partner left and also like at our local hospital, it was a private room. It's public hospital, but you have a private room and your partner can stay with you. I had so many things to set up and food and all this stuff, whereas here I was just like shared rooms and anyway, that's fine. He left and I went to sleep, and about 4 hours later I woke up with quite strong pressure. So I told the midwife on call, and she thought it was best just to try and get some more rest and relax. So I lay back down, but I quickly jumped back up and said, I don't feel like laying down. I'm going to call my partner. So I rang him. He didn't answer the phone. I rang his brother, whose house he was staying at. He didn't answer the phone. Got hold of, no, I rang one more, his brother's partner, who didn't answer, but saw the missed call and got Liam out of bed and told him to come to the hospital. He came and it was really nice. We basically, because actually in that hospital, I was lucky enough that we had like a whole ward because it was like the weekend so we just had our own music. We had a diffuser. We did some slow dancing and just like, I just held on to him. So in a way, it was actually quite relaxing. And we had two midwives to ourselves basically who were really lovely there. And because it was a major hospital, they'd seen everything and they were not worried about me. And one had actually asked, what's your fears? And I told her, and she said, that's not happening for you. We're going to support you for what you want. So I did feel really well supported there. But yeah, a few hours later, they said, you're about 2 centimeters dilated, so we can break your waters. So we did that. And I had learned through this calm birth course that, to ask to wait and to take time instead of just going with every single step that they would like you to do. And they were happy with that. So we waited, and really soon, and I remember watching the clock and thinking, it's too soon. Like, I feel like I want to push, and I said that to my midwife. It had been less than an hour, and she said, listen to your body. Your body knows what to do. And so, I just basically gave a big push, and my baby's head was born, and then gave one more, and she was born.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think because I had heard something in the corner, and turns out it was totally just my own mind. But I heard something, I thought something was wrong because actually I was hooked up to one of those like monitors. And so I thought something, and I was like, okay, I've got the urge to push. I've got to get her out, like I want to. So I just, she was born so quickly. And I was so happy, you know, because I avoided the Syntocin drip, and I felt like, and had no drugs or anything. So I felt like I had achieved somewhat that natural birth that I had really wanted, you know, so different, nothing I could have imagined. Yeah. And I was really happy, and I was like so in love with my baby. And, you know, I was really happy, and it was a great experience once I felt like I was in control and empowered in that space. Yeah.
And it really goes to show like the way you're cared for. It doesn't matter where you are.
Yes.
Like the impact of that is so great. It's so great. And of course, it sounded like you had just the most amazing midwives at that second place. Yeah, that made you feel so safe and listened to and respected and heard and on your own terms.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm so grateful to that team there. Yeah. Amazing.
So why did you not choose to birth at that hospital the second time then, Abbie?
Well, so many reasons. We don't have time for all those reasons. But mainly, I was going to birth at the local hospital again. You know, there was only 2 midwives left from those 2 years before, and one of them I knew sort of through another space, who's really, really lovely. And the other one I hadn't actually met before. So it definitely wasn't the one that I kind of had this weird vibe with. So I started all my appointments there, and they were all really lovely, but I had a lot of anxiety, which I expressed each time. My blood pressure was always very high at the beginning of our session. And then after half an hour of chatting of, you know, positive stuff, it would be normal. So it was always normal, but always presented high in the beginning. However, they said it was now routine to book you in with the anaesthetist as part of your just pre-birth kind of formalities. I know. And so after having one midwife appointment at the hospital, I then waited for some time and then went to the anaesthetist office, and it just it was so bad. I won't go into details, but it was just so bad. We were just on such a different place. I basically just said to him, yes, okay, yes, because I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. So I said, okay, yes, yep, sure, whatever. But I left that, and I'd been at the hospital for probably about 4 hours with those 2 appointments, and I actually had chest pain from anxiety from just being there for such a extended duration. And when I got home, I had already scheduled an appointment with a local private midwife, and she was coming a couple of hours later to my house on that same day. And when she arrived and we started chatting, we were sitting on our decking, and I live across the road from the beach, and I just see sand dunes, and it's so relaxing. And as soon as we started chatting, I knew that I wanted to have a baby at home with Renee as my support, and I was not going back to the hospital. And that was it. And again, at the start of my pregnancy, we really couldn't afford a private midwife. Our mortgage was so high with interest rate changes. It was something we felt like we couldn't afford. But I actually had some inheritance from my grandpa, and I said to my partner, I want to use some of that money on our birth because I feel like it's really important for our family and for my mental health and well-being, and which is then our family's health and well-being, to have a different experience to last time and to have an empowering experience so I'm confident in myself again. So
and he was on board this time.
He was so on board. Yeah. And even after that first birth, he actually he was always on board with home birth. It was just that financial barrier was still a big barrier, you know. But then that was lifted. So I was excited. I was finally excited to have our birth. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So exciting. What a journey.
Before I was nervous, and then I was like, actually, this now is excitement.
Yeah. I love that. And what time did that happen? What week were you?
At that change, or that was 33 weeks.
Right. So pretty late.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again is so great. Like it's never too late to change your care provider. I think that's just such an important message that we can't emphasize enough every time. Like
Definitely.
really, really listen to yourself. And I love that you have the financial opportunity to choose yourself and your baby and your
Yep.
family's health and well-being, because that truly is the most important thing for each woman to tune
Yep.
into. What is that for me? And it's not selfish. I think that's important.
Definitely.
You know, it's
It
not
is.
selfish to choose what makes you feel most safe, because ultimately, as a woman especially, like we are kind of the backbone of the family, and like, you know,
Totally.
the way we feel and the way we, you know, it's going to affect children, husbands, partners, you know, it is
Hmm.
important. And
So important. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Beautiful. So let's dive on into your birth story. Or is there anything else from that pregnancy after 33
Uh,
weeks you want to mention?
I would like to also say that just before, so at about 39 weeks, I had to go to my local GP for something totally unrelated. And whilst she was waiting for her computer to load to do this medical report, she took my blood pressure. And as soon as she put the cuff to my arm, I could feel my heart rate increase dramatically. So I knew it was going to be a high reading. And actually, my blood pressure was not needed for this other medical certificate. She was just doing it because she thought she needed to because I was pregnant and she was my original GP, but I told her now I was having a home birth. And I just think she was really old school and didn't even ask for my permission and just did it. And that caused a whole lot of drama because then it wouldn't drop down and she was worried about me. And I assured her, I'm actually not worried. It's totally white coat syndrome. I explained what had happened in my previous birth, and she was like, oh, I'm worried. What if there is something wrong? And I said, there isn't something wrong. And then the worst thing was as well, then she couldn't finish my medical certificate because she decided that maybe that would make me a risk for uh what's it called, hypertension, you
Yeah.
know, which made me angry and upset. And I said, I would like to go home now. Like, I don't want to stay for this appointment anymore. So I'm going to leave. I've got a blood pressure machine at home. I can test it at home. And she said, please let me know by the, what it is at home. I just want to check that and she was actually then caring. She was saying, I just want to make sure you're safe and your baby's safe. I got home and I actually, on my way home, I was crying and like talking to, left a message for my partner to say how like upset I was and if he could be home to, just provide some support because I was feeling really rattled. And yeah, I spoke to my midwife and told her what had happened. And she said, I'm not worried about you at all. Like, you have no other signs. And I just loved her so much. Anytime I was in doubt, she was just so confident in my ability and my body that gave me confidence because I lacked until then and until actually my birth, I've lacked confidence in my own ability and my body. So to have someone that I believed in and who'd seen it all before, to be confident, that gave me the confidence that I needed. It makes me
Yeah.
teary.
Yeah, well,
Um,
that's beautiful. And you know, what you're feeling is so valid. And so many women feel exactly like you. You know,
yeah,
you're so not alone in feeling this.
yeah. And so, yeah, that's another reason I thought to come on to the show because of this
Yeah.
blood pressure thing. So after that, I got rid of the blood pressure machine at home because even when I tested it at home, I was completely like feeling relaxed. I'd put the thing on and I would go dug, 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 dug. I was like, I probably can't swear on this. So yeah, I was basically like,
I do all the time.
fucking hell, like what the fuck? I
Yeah.
don't have high blood pressure. And I was like saying to my partner, because he knows about different ailments. I'm like, okay, could I be still like running up and down the stairs and, surviving all this time with high blood pressure at these readings? And he's like, no, you wouldn't be. So, and he's like, I know that you don't. You're okay. And so each midwife appointment, which as the final weeks, it was maybe once a week,
Mm.
uh, she asked me, would you like me to test your blood pressure? I said, no, thank you. And she would tick declined. And she would look at my ankle, she'd ask a few questions, and she said, you look amazing. And I'd feel reassured and I didn't get nervous. So that, yeah, that was just really like, that was a big deal. knowing that I didn't have to take those tests, you know, and often we think in medical and with the GP, she just went ahead and did it. And I think we don't realize we actually can say no to some of these tests, and it should not implicate our choices or, you know, our support from medical teams.
Absolutely. And I think this is such key information that it's just done. And also a lot of women, and you know, myself included, when I walk into the GP's office, there, even though I myself, you know, have been a medical professional, right? I'm a former midwife now. You know, there's still that imbalance when you walk into someone else's office. And this is also why I talk so much about this thing about if you choose a hospital birth, you do walk into their domain. When you choose to birth at home, they walk into yours. The power imbalance is just not there at home as it is just automatically as you go to someone else's office or to the hospital, right? And so these are things that you don't think about. And like, you know, but if anyone listening now, like just think about how you feel when you go to the dentist, to the midwife, to the doctor, you know, right? It's like you become this little patient, this little person. The expert knows, you know, you do make yourself smaller and you don't feel like you have that strong voice that you have in other circumstances, right? And I've attended births and cared for women that are like CEOs and tough women in the workforce, or like, you know, business owners, whatever. But when you step in to that office or in that environment, you're no longer that. It's very interesting how you change. And it's good to just be aware of it. So I'm aware of it walking into the hospital, into the office, GP, whatever. And I notice myself how I feel and think differently or like act differently. Right. And then you can do something about it. But I think it's really important to talk about. And it's not something like, oh, you're not strong because you didn't say no to the, you know, it's just that is so, it's such a normal reaction that you just go, oh, okay, you're going to take my blood pressure. Okay, then like, feel right, but I guess they're doing it. Like, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I love your midwife though. And that's the thing too, when you employ someone and they are independent and they're really good midwives, they know also that all they have to do is ask you and offer you these things, sometimes that we might think is over the top and we wouldn't want to, but because of we're under registration or whatever, we have to. The only thing you have to do is decline that, right? And every woman has that choice, just decline.
Yes.
And if you have a good midwife, there's not going to be an argument. There's going to be an understanding. There's going to be a communication. She can see other signs if you would have preeclampsia, right? Which is what she's
exactly. That's right. Yeah.
So let's dive into your birth story now, shall we?
So I got to, must have been 41 weeks and a bit. And I remember calling Renee, my midwife, and saying, I'm a bit like I'm starting to feel quite nervous and anxious. So she was actually going to come the next day for our appointment, but she came a day early and just said, yep, you're great. Baby sounds great, you know, relax. So the next day, she's almost 3 now, but my first daughter, she said she did not want to be home for the birth. She would like to have a sleepover, and she does family daycare, and her carer, Jackie, is amazing and had offered to have Tenzin sleep over when it was birth time, and she would come and pick her up or whatever needed to happen. But as the weeks leading up to it, she'd offered to do a couple of sleepovers as a bit of a practice. And then she knew that I was starting to feel a little bit anxious. So she offered on that Friday, would you like to have a sleepover? Tenzin can have a sleepover. You and Liam can just have a night off. And so I said, that would be great. Let's do that. So in the morning I said goodbye. And so off she went. Then I told my partner, go to the gym and like just do something for yourself, but also use the shower there just in case we need to fill up the birthing pool tonight. We want as much hot water at our house as possible. So take all your things. So off he went. And then I went for a nice big walk on the beach, and it was like beautiful conditions. It was winter, but like beautiful surf conditions. And my usual walk, I actually stopped myself short because I felt quite tired. And I thought, I'm just going to honor this fatigue. I'm not pushing it. And I also had in my head, like, oh, sometimes that can be a sign, you know. I walked home and then I started my yoga practice. And just as I began, I actually had this urge to dance, and I started doing some free movement, and this beautiful song came on, which kind of goes on about I am love. And I just had that on repeat a few times, and I had tears and laughter and all sorts, like this full cleansing of emotions. Then I did my practice, and again, I kept finding myself in child's pose rather than some of the flow that I really like to do. And then at the end of my practice, I was doing some prayers, and after they finished, I started to talk to my baby, and I said to her, and I knew we were having a girl, I said, I'm not pressuring you at all, but I am starting to feel a little bit anxious, and I know that you're probably feeling that too. So if you would like to join us, we're really ready for you now. Then I went to the toilet and I had a little bit of the mucus plug show. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, it's going to happen this weekend, you know. So I rang my partner, and he was actually coming home with some takeaway for lunch. So he came home, and I was just so excited. I was so excited that I naturally was going into labor, because I honestly didn't know if I was going to, because of so much that had been spoken about at hospital. And in fact, my best friend, when she went to 43 weeks and then went in for a checkup, and it ended in a C-section. And someone had told her, a lot of women's bodies don't naturally go into labor anymore.
What
and I
the
had
actual fuck?
Right. And I must have had that stuck in my head, because I was in so much relief, like, oh my God, I'm going into labor. Like, it's so ridiculous. Of course our bodies do.
That is insane.
So,
Listen.
right.
So listen.
Yeah.
That person actually believes that, though. Like, that's
Yes.
a mind-boggling thing to me, that
Yeah.
just because the induction rates are just skyrocketing and women are not quote unquote allowed to go past 41 weeks, or some places 40 weeks. The assumption from this medical professional is that women's bodies just don't work anymore. Some
I know.
women's bodies they will just be pregnant forever. Like,
I know.
that is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but it's also really scary that someone actually believes
scary.
that and tells.
And she's a midwife in a hospital, right? Yeah. So,
holy moly, that is insane.
I know. Yeah. And my midwife had assured me that every woman she'd ever known, her body has gone into labor. She's like, no one's pregnant forever, you know? And it seems ridiculous when you think about it like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, here I was super excited. Yes, my body's going to work. We had a beautiful lunch, and then we decided to watch a funny movie, and, you know, so we're sitting on the couch. And at this point, my sister actually, Freya, was going to be part of my birth, but she'd just gone to Bali with her family, which was quite funny. It's quite funny. And now we talk about it, that it was meant to just be me and my partner, I think, for that birth, you know. But I was messaging her, and I was super excited, and I was asking her, like, okay, because I'd had so much of the Braxton, Braxton hit. Yeah. I'd had so many, like, the whole pregnancy actually, but like so much that the last week, that it just felt the same, you know, that day. So I said, oh, like, I don't know if I'm in labor or not. And she said, you'll know. just chill, like, you'll know. And then it would have been about 2 p.m., 3 p.m., I think, maybe 4 o'clock, that I felt some slight, like, change. It went to more of a uncomfortable kind of contraction feeling, rather than just the uterus contracting. Yeah. So I felt like, okay, I definitely feel like this is the start of labor. So yeah, I think it would have been about 4 p.m. And I'd already messaged my midwife to say, like, yeah, there was a bloody show. And then at this point, I feel like this is actually some contractions beginning. we had dinner early, and then my partner wanted to go and we were going to lay down together, and he thought it would be nice to get a little bit sexual. And as soon as we started that, seriously, the contractions we're like so close together that I was like, we need to stop. Like, I'll have this baby within a moment, and I'm not ready for it to go that quick. So we stopped, and we sort of laid there, and he almost went to sleep, and it would have been about 9 p.m. And I said, I can't sleep. I'm going to go into the lounge room, and I'd really love you to come and join me, actually. So he joined me. And at that point, I just began riding kind of the waves. And in between, I would rest on my bolster in child's pose. We were timing just so that I could alert the midwives. They told me like at a certain time, like maybe to let them know they would come. And I told him, I don't want to actually time. I don't want to look at time now. You time, you make the call when you want them to come. I'm so fine. I'm so happy. Everything feels great. So yeah, I wasn't concentrating on that. He called Renee at about 10:30. And she arrived, and yeah, it was just like super, like really good vibes. I was laughing and really chatty with her in between. But as soon as I had a contraction, I just concentrated and breathed, and I was kind of kneeling with my arms kind of folded over the couch, and then I would just relax into child's pose after. And then yeah, so in Victoria, you have your appointed midwife, and you also have a second midwife present for your birth. But the second one was just in her car in the driveway so that she wasn't interfering. She wasn't needed. So she was just resting. And Renee basically was filling up the water pool, the birthing pool. And we'd set everything up earlier, which was really beautiful because Tenzin wasn't there. It was amazing because she wasn't there, that I could just completely like take our time to set everything up and relax. And I didn't have to think about her needing to go or anyone coming into our house either. So it was just super relaxed and calm. And yeah, it got to about, I don't know time. I only know it afterwards. But it was about 12 o'clock, 11:30. And I said, I'd like to get into the pool now. I had been resisting because I'd heard so much that it could sort of slow things down, or, if it got a lot stronger, that you kind of want that like change. So it felt pretty intense by this point that I was definitely ready to jump in the pool. So I did. And then I remember it really like picking up, getting super intense, the contraction. So I said, and there had been time, but it was so quick in my mind. It was so quick, but I'd been in the pool about an hour by a couple of photos that were taken just before we got in the pool, and then midway, and then the birth. Yeah. And I said, turn up the music, because I really liked that song, and I could feel myself getting louder at that point. And previously, before getting into the pool, I'd been fairly quiet, I guess, just breathing through the contractions. But once I got into the pool, I definitely had really low sounds, and yeah, things changed quite dramatically. And at that point, Renee had actually asked the other midwife, she'd seen the changes. So she'd asked her to come in, and she didn't even say hi or anything. She just I was aware that she'd come in, but she was real quiet and was just in the background. Liam, my partner, was amazing. He was just using some pressure points that felt amazing at different points. We talked about it, and we'd practice a few different things. And I was just maybe once or twice, Renee had said to me, "You're doing amazing." That was it. It was just some encouraging words. And yeah, after I'd asked for the music to turn up, I could feel myself starting to crown. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm not pushing this time. Because my first birth, I did tear, and I had some stitches, and that the healing, like, it healed, but it did leave some damage, some changes in my sensation and feeling. So I was really like, okay, I'm going to see how my body will actually naturally move this baby. And yeah, it was intense. And I remember thinking, fuck, this is fucked. This ring of fire is real and I do not like this. And I was like watching some of the birthing like affirmation cards that my sister had lent me. And it was something like your body was made to do this. I was like, okay, yes, it is. But I literally thought, fucking hell, this is so intense, because with Tenzin, it was so quick. It was just like, all right, push it out, push my baby out. But this time, yeah, I felt all of it and it was intense. So yeah, after about like 3 contractions going up and down, her head was born. And that was a massive relief. And then I kind of just like relaxed. And it was a really long space between then the next contraction. And when that came, it felt really like subtle. And Renee, and I actually was kind of waiting to see if my body would actually do it the rest for me. And it didn't. And Renee said, do you feel like you want to do a little push? So I did a little push and she was born. And that was it. I brought her up. Renee helped guide her through, and I brought her up and put her on my chest. And I just felt so much relief. And it was, I think with her, it was just so much relief because it had been such a big build up. And yeah, I was like, wow. I kind of, for the first time in my life, I was quiet, actually. I was really quiet. Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful story. So it was really around 9 or something that you got like, okay, I can't be in bed anymore. That's kind of where it really
Yep.
kicked in. And then when did
Yes.
you birth her?
Just after 1:30.
Yeah. So you're a quick birther. When it finally kicks in, they shoot out.
Yes. Yeah. And with Tenzin, they'd broken the waters, but with Katara, her head was born fully in the sack. So I think that's why as well, like it was a really different birthing experience with her. Obviously completely natural. But yeah, Liam said it was so incredible to see her whole head, inside the birthing sack. Like amazing. But that then broke when she was birthed. Her body came.
Beautiful. So that's like birthing protocol, and that's such a kind of auspicious special birth called mermaid birth, right? And is much more common at home.
It is.
Obviously, because at home it's natural and no interference. And that's so beautiful that you've experienced that. It can also be a bit more intense because obviously there's just more to push out when the bag is intact.
Yeah.
So it can also be experienced like you did feel like, whoa, what the?
Yeah. Yeah.
As well. It's different, but
yeah,
just different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. And what about the placenta? Did you birth it in the pool?
No, it took probably within the hour. It wasn't so long, but she wasn't feeding very well in the pool, and I just was uncomfortable. And so I got out and was on the couch for a little bit, and then as soon as I went to the toilet, then the placenta just slipped out. And I think it just needed that gravity and that sort of that positioning. And I guess that was also really different in hospital. It was birthed within 10 seconds after I had birthed Tenzin. So yeah, it was interesting because when I went into like thinking about my second birth, and actually podcasts that I listened to quite a few that said, like the caption was, quick first birth and then really slow second birth, to prepare myself just in case mine was really slow or over a few days or something, just so that I, wasn't expecting a quick second birth, because often people do talk about the second one can be quicker. But I just didn't want to get get caught into thinking if it was going really slow or something. But it was really different, and that was kind of really exciting because it was new, and yeah, I was really present because it was different.
Yeah, beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming and sharing these stories. There was so
My
much
pleasure.
wisdom within it. Now, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I would definitely recommend going for a home birth for your first birth rather than waiting for your second to see how the first one goes, which is what our mentality was a little bit like. And that's definitely what my partner had sort of thought. And definitely don't wait. If you can have a home birth and that's something that you are interested in, then I would so recommend it. It is amazing. But also definitely knowledge is power, and informing yourself to make those decisions, and then definitely to know, all of what may happen in birth, all of the potential of natural birth, and also all of the potential of what different what differences there could be. Then you can navigate all of those with more ease and have more informed choices. So and then definitely your support, your midwife, your partner, your friends, family, however that looks for you, but not only for your actual birth, but definitely postpartum. And I think that's something that's often forgotten, because there's many of us who do put a lot of effort into the birth and into the pregnancy and the birth. But actually, for me, the birth was easy. It was the postpartum that presented a lot of challenges for us. And yeah, so definitely like put some time and energy into preparing for that postpartum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you're sharing that because so true. And not just the practical help, not just the
Yeah.
practical support, like prepare emotionally, like
Mm-hmm.
learn about the rite of passage, like understand the first time especially, like the identity shift, and like do
Definitely.
some deep diving into that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's great to know some basics of breastfeeding and baby care too, and just the healing of your own physical body if you do have a tear, just a bit of those things, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wish more women, and thank you for saying that. I wish more women would do that. And I always
Yeah.
say that, because I have the natural birth course and then I have the nourishing postpartum course. And I would say 90% of people take the natural birth course and about 10% take the
Yeah.
postpartum, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
like, oh, such a shame. Because
Yeah.
like you say, it's like, it's, if not equal, it's maybe even bigger actually to prepare for.
Definitely. Yes. And then also, as a second time mama, I fell into that trap of, okay, yeah, I've done this before, it'll all come back. And every baby is different. And you have to divide your attention and your energy and your time. So, yeah, it was a bit of a shock to the systems for us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think as well, for the both first time and second and multiple, like that self-care for yourself as a person and a mum is just so important. And I think that was even harder the second time around because you have less time.
Mm.
And so I let all of my daily practices slip because I was just so consumed in motherhood. And it wasn't till about 6 weeks that I finally started doing some yoga again, and then a few months surfing, and the things that I really love and that help to, make me feel relaxed and grounded and centered. So that's another thing I would just really recommend, even if it's 5 minutes. Take
Yeah.
that space.
Take that
Yeah.
space. Thank you so much for coming on the
My
podcast and
pleasure.
sharing. It's been a
Thanks
pleasure.
for having me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.